Hey, gang. Thought that this would be kind of a fun one to do since I was out on vacation. I didn't get to do my usual roadmap roundup or my Sprintwatch that I usually do on Reddit. And again, it's kind of nearing the end of the year. I've kind of been dubious on how useful the progress tracker is on a grander scheme, so I thought that this might be a good one. I might just start doing these videos as opposed to doing the actual Sprintwatch that I've been doing on Reddit for the last 6 or 7 years, whatever it is. My roadmap tracker was actually one of the first ones that came out, and then other people had better ways of doing it, and then mine just kind of evolved better with what CIG was trying to show, so it kind of weathered the storms of the various changes. But anyway, roadmap roundup. I was going to go through, kind of do a look at the roadmap roundup, release view, progress tracker, and then just kind of talk about a few things I'm seeing. This one's going to be a little bit different than usual. I'm going to mostly focus on things I think might be dropping at the end of the year. I kind of had this on the wild speculation a couple weeks back, and interestingly, other streamers are starting to pick up on a lot of the things I was saying there. I don't think they watch this channel. I think they're just kind of catching up to the evidence that I was seeing in the progress tracker. So I guess it's not completely useless. That sounds interesting. Let's get this. Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen this before, this is where I kind of go through and I do the Sprintwatch. A lot of content creators do this. They kind of go through the roadmap roundup. Some look at the release view. Some look at, I don't think many look at the progress tracker in depth like I do, which is kind of the meat of this show. But I just kind of go through the progress tracker, kind of see what changes are coming. This time, like I was saying at the beginning, I'm more focused on things I think will drop before the end of the year. So at like CitizenCon and things that I don't think will be in there that I've kind of heard mention off and on through the last couple of weeks while I was on vacation. But let's go ahead and get into it. There's not a whole lot of changes this time, so my timing's pretty good. We're kind of in what I like to call the doldrums of information. It's basically the information drought before CitizenCon, which I really wish CIG wouldn't do. It didn't used to be this bad. It would be like about a month before CitCon, we'd start getting a little drought of information, but we generally knew it was going to be at CitCon. Now it seems like they start that stuff in January, like, ooh, we can't tell you that. Ha ha, you'll have to wait until CitCon. It's kind of like, just give us the information, guys. It was fun with the eclipse, trying to figure out what the eclipse was, but not every ship and feature needs to be under the wrap of secrecy. Just going to throw that out there. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into this. The first thing I want to start with is caveats. The first caveat is that just because something is 100% completed on the progress tracker, that just means that it's the end of the known sprints. Does not mean that that thing is actually feature complete or that it won't be iterated on in the future. It just means that the planned sprints, like for Actors Status 2 here, which I actually meant to pregame open, may not be ending here. It may have like another year of work on it. It's just, this is as far as they have planned it for the actor feature team, which is this little AFT. So that's caveat number one. Just because something's done on the progress tracker doesn't mean it's done. Second caveat, I am just a dude on the internet, so my expertise on this project comes from following it so long and looking at the information they're giving us. Obviously, I don't have all the information CIG does, or even that other content creators that have more connections than CIG have. So if CIG is saying something different than I am, CIG is probably right. That said, let's go ahead and get into it. So we'll start with the roadmap roundup, which is here. And kind of like I was saying, not a lot of changes this time. So notable changes for August 23rd, 2023. Release view. The following cards have been added to release view in the 320 column, targeting a launch with Alpha 3.20.x, which I do think we'll be getting before the end of the year, and might be getting at IAE as opposed to SitCon. So I think that they'll drop 320 on us in the next week or so. Then we'll get IA, which is the big ship show, and then we'll get SitCon in October. But I do think that we're going to be getting 320 prior to SitCon dropping. Crusader C1 Spirit, so this is good. The C1, we've known the A1 was out there. I pretty much called that the C1 was obviously like in the pipe and pretty close to done. It's the E1, the sort of passenger transport, sort of the Learjet, that's going to be waiting on it, and we'll take a look at that later. Building, balancing, and implementing Crusader Industries' small multi-crew cargo ship, the C1 Spirit, into the game. The Tumbrel Stank. Building, implementing, and balancing Tumbrel's light tank, the Stank, as a game-ready vehicle. And that's it for Roadmap Roundup. Let's go on over to the release view and look at it. So, ships and vehicles, again, if you look for like the orange dot, those are changes, so nothing up here has changed. Only thing that's changed is down here. We now have the Tumbrel Stank for 3.20.x and the C1 Spirit. A1 we're apparently getting with 3.20. It's still tentative. They haven't moved it over to committed. I assume they're going to be dropping it into the PU soon. Or they might just be satisfied it's a small enough and simple enough ship that they don't really need to worry about it. Bombs they've been testing with the A2 for 2-3 years, so they're good on that. I think 2 years. Mystical C, on the other hand, is really complicated, so they're trying to get it into the PTU and get it all tested out before it drops. But A1 I think is an easy one to fit in for 3.20. So that'll be cool. We'll get our first look at the Crusader line. C1, I'm pretty sure what they're waiting for on that, and I'm kind of surprised they didn't apply this to the whole C, is waiting on tractor beams, which I think are going to be coming in 3.20.x. But we'll get into that. So let's pop on over here to the progress tracker. So Actor Status Tier 2, this is one that I think probably won't be coming this year. I kept thinking that it might be. It looks like it wraps here. I think this is just as far as the Actor feature team is booked, and I don't think we're getting all this now. This is all related to like NPCs, but it also looks like it's the next iteration of medical gameplay, like DNA, integrity, medical insurance, cybernetic limbs, and cloning. That all sounds like big brain stuff, and 29 weeks probably isn't enough time to explore that. So I would expect sometime around here, or even next week, for this one to jump out, or it'll be one of those things where it'll be completed for 6 months and then it'll pop back on with a big long bar on it, like Derelict Elements. So next one I wanted to talk about, Argo SRV. Again, we have one of the downstream teams in here. Audio will still have to drop in for the Argo SRV, and of course tractor beams will have to be done, and I think they're probably waiting until tractor beams are finished before they start working on the audio, because this thing has gigantic tractor beams, so maybe unique audios and hums inside the ship, and they don't want to do that until they can actually see what the VFX looks like, although it looks like the VFX is done kind of back here. So expect the Argo SRV to jump back on. I wouldn't be surprised if we got the Argo SRV for 3.20.x and they just don't want to tell it yet. It could also be, I think they're going to work in another patch at the end of the year, and I think that patch will be 4.0. Other people have been kind of picking up on that. I said it a few weeks ago, and I still think it's possible. 4.0 would be dropping pyro on us, basically dropping pyro into jump points. If you look in the key bindings, there's actually key bindings for engaging your jump drive and disengaging your jump drive, and that's not your quantum drive, which lets you jump short distances. That's actually allowing you to go through a jump point. So slightly different tech. They've got the key bindings in there. Do they have the tech? The big question is, and I'm sure this is one of the things they're holding back, is how reliable is server tech, because that is what is going to be driving Pyro and whether they drop it or not. But I would think with a 2-day sitcon and as fiery and spicy as the community is right now, that it would behoove CIG to drop Pyro this year, because if they talk a bunch about Pyro and then they just kind of hint that it's coming next year, I think people will lose their damn minds, even if they release a Squadron 42 drop date. And I think Squadron 42, I've said this before, Q4 of 2024, so at the end of next year. They're not dropping Squadron 42 this year. I've heard some people get that a little bit screwed up. They're not dropping Squad 42 this year. They might drop like a quick demo, like a 15-minute demo or a 30-minute demo. I think that is a possibility. It's a long shot possibility, but CIG would be stupid to go up against Bethesda, which I believe is backed by Microsoft, and has been advertising Starfield for the last year. That would be, not that CIG never makes mistakes, that would be probably a fatal one. So 2024, Artificial Gravity, let's talk about this. So this is engineering game loop. It does wrap in looks like December. So if there was a 4.0, I've said before that I think it would be surprising if they dropped Pyro and engineering and the new bounty hunting and like hacking, like another big game loop, because not only is server meshing going to break the game, probably like Persistent A streaming did, but then you would have this new game loop that's breaking things too. So they'd have to dig through and find out what's actually causing the problem. It just gives them one more vector. I would assume they would go shallow rather than really deep, like not drop a ton of things at once. Could be wrong though. They might have been holding a whole bunch of things back for server meshing, which I expect server meshing to be the actual logjam for this game, that once we get server meshing, which they've tried a few iterations of, and it looks like they finally got it working. Yeah, if that's the case, then fingers crossed, right? So let's keep on rolling down. Squadron 42, just a lot of people have kind of come on to this now. I've been saying it probably for about a year now that Squadron 42 looks like it's in beta. They're now officially saying it's in beta. You typically don't announce beta versus alpha until you're kind of in the last legs of the game development cycle. So I would expect them to drop a date for Squadron 42. Now, the real question is, how many of these chapters are in part 1 of Squadron 42? Is it all of these, or is it only like 1 through 5? I don't think we really know. So, I mean, it's possible that we've got part 1, part 2, part 3 all right here, and this is the entire series of Squadron 42, or it could be part 1 is 28 chapters long, which seems like a lot, and that would be mildly disappointing, because if, again, I know they're planning on rolling out Squadron 42 in different stages, so if there's another chapter beyond this, or another part beyond these 28 chapters, might mean further PU development would be similarly delayed. Thankfully, they don't have to rebuild the engine or rebuild the ships or anything like that, so I would expect the stress on the development of the PU to be less. So, fingers crossed that this is the whole game, and they're going to roll it out like Chapter 1 through 10 is part 1, and Chapter 11 through 20 is part 2, and 21 through 28 is part 3, or whatever. Hopefully, that is the case. Fingers crossed for that, too. Crusader Spirit. So here we go. So we know the A1 is probably back in here somewhere. Like, do note there aren't any downstream teams here. So Audio VFX have not taken their stab at the Crusader Spirit. That said, I don't think it'll take that long for this ship. This is not a big ship or very complicated. Or at least the A1 and the C1 aren't that complicated. But you'll notice this line keeps going out till the end of the year. Basically anything that ends here in week 12 of quarter 4 that's just as long as they've got it planned. That's going to stretch into the next year after they do the reevaluation around here in quarter 1. A1 is probably here. C1 is probably here. All of this is going to be the E1, and that one is going to wait until NPCs are walking around rather than standing on chairs. And so far in the PTU, NPCs have been acting pretty normal for the most part. Like in the last couple update patches on the PTU, they've been looking pretty good. We'll see if that holds all the way to the live release, but they've kind of been narrowing it down. Could also be a good sign that they're kind of solving some of their back-end issues. Fire hazard, this is another thing. I think that will come with like fire hazard, fire extinguisher. I think that will end up coming with engineering gameplay. So it's kind of a toss-up whether we get engineering with 4.0. If they kind of hold that back, if they don't launch, one of the rumors that I've heard that I think could be real is that they'll drop 4.0 to the PTU at the end of the year, like Christmas time, or maybe SitCon. Wouldn't be a bad idea to just leave that one in the PTU for a while, because CIG kind of has the bad habit of dropping a broken patch on us in December, and then they go on vacation or basically go incommunicado for 2 months, and we just got a broken patch and nobody can play it, and people go and do other things, which, given that most people, myself included, will probably be playing Starfield or Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty, might not be terrible timing. We'll find out. But Fire Hazard will almost certainly be coming with engineering gameplay. So if we get engineering gameplay of 4.0, we'll likely get ships that'll be lighting on fire. Freight elevators. So this is the next iteration of cargo play, and I would assume this would come with right now they've kind of got the hack in for the whole sea, where you just kind of go to an area and the big freight boxes just kind of appear. They just kind of spawn in one at a time. Takes about 4 or 5 minutes for them to, if you've got a full load on your whole sea. I think freight elevators would actually come with truly physicalized cargo. Like, you have to unload it, or you hire the station or station hands, longshoremen basically, to load or unload your ship. So it's going to be one of the two. And freight elevators will likely be a part of that. But again, ends out here in week 12, quarter 4, which means it's going to be next year asset. So we're not getting that yet. Incendiary ammunition, just kind of wanted to point out that there's a lot of cool little ammunition types. We got incendiary. I'll find them as we scroll down. I'll point them out. But we've got a whole bunch of them there. This is the weapon feature team. I would assume VFX would have to have a stab too, so we probably won't be getting these this year, but maybe there's enough time for VFX to kind of get cracking in here. Don't know. So life support, again, engineering, it's popping off here, which is 132 weeks. I think this might mean that life support is done, but they're not going to put that in until resource management is in and fire suppression, all that sort of stuff, just because that is the all of those things are going to be puzzle pieces that go together. So yeah, life support, all that stuff will drop at the same time. If it drops in 4.0, then maybe we get it at the end of the year. If not, then next year, possibly. So there's a whole bunch of these. Map and radar system rework, the new Moby glass, which is Right down here, the new MFDs, which are right here. I could see them, and I've been saying for a while that I could see them dropping a new UI experience on us. That's not beyond the pale to get that for the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully we're getting this by the end of the year, because the UI in this game is starting to get a little dated, and with Squad 42 hopefully dropping next year, that's something they'll need to nail down sooner than later. New missions, cargo hauling. This is one that I was hoping they were going to drop with the whole sea, but it looks like making use of the freight elevators feature. This mission type will have players hauling large quantities of cargo to earn both AUEC and reputation. And kind of landing out here, it does kind of look like they're aiming for the end of the year with that one. And again, if you look at freight elevators, that's one that's probably going to be going into next year. So even though the mission is wrapping here, they're just going to keep polishing it and polishing and polishing it until freight elevators are done. Or they'll just move this team on to something else. New mission restoration contracts. This one's kind of cool because as opposed to stripping stuff off of ships, you're actually going to be fixing ships. So this will be the first time that we're actually given repair as a feature and a job in the game, which is nice because it's one more game loop. It's kind of related to salvage. It's the flip side of salvage. Looks like it's over here. I would assume there's going to be more teams rather than the mission feature team involved in this. Like the mission feature team is basically just kind of setting things up, unless they have the assets. I mean, we don't really have a ship that can fix things, although this, so patching up the hull, you can do that with the multi-tool, but that seems like it would be a lot of work to do that with just the multi-hull, so they might be dropping a smaller repair ship on us, which would make sense to roll out a starter repair ship before you were to roll out something like the Crucible, which is the capital ship size. So test the mechanics on the Vulture or the Prospector equivalent size here. But replacing missy or faulty internal components, or faulty, so that'll come with wear and tear on the components, and replacing weapon loadouts in new salvage yard locations. So that is interesting. New salvage yard locations. Don't know what that's about. Hopefully we hear about this during SitCon. Might be kind of cool. Origin X1, little bike. I think we get this one at the end of the year. For a long time, I was thinking they drop it with 600i. We haven't heard about the 600i for probably a couple years now, so it's probably a little ways off. But anyway, Origin X1, I think there's a chance we get it by the end of the year. No downstream teams, no audio or VFX, but they are actually I think it's one dev that's working on this is actually a few weeks into it. I would give this one a better chance of getting in than something like the BMM, just because of the scale. Like you have one dev or two devs working on the BMM, that's a monumental task. You have one dev working on something that's smaller than the Misk Fury, a little more doable, depending on what else they're working on. This is the big one. This is PES and server meshing. You can see it wraps here in week 1. So is this actually wrapping in week 1? I mean, obviously not. They're going to keep iterating on server meshing over and over and over again for the next couple years. But the fact that their planned sprints are ending here is kind of a decent sign, or at least like one more weight on the 4.0 dropping to us this year. I certainly think that if the only thing they were doing was announcing Squadron 42 dropping, they would probably just have one day at LA's Convention Center, which isn't a cheap place to rent, I wouldn't think. You would just have one day and you just have that be the all-day event, and that would probably mollify 50% of the salty community at this point, but if you can roll out 4.0 on day 2, or day 1, Squad 42 is day 1, or day 2, then I think you win a lot of people back with that. We got Maelstrom here with physical damage and breakability, which hopefully we'll be seeing that pretty soon. Prone tier 1. So I just wanted to talk about this. These, we're getting the new mantling, and I believe it's climbing in 3.20. So you can kind of jump and grab onto things and mantle your way up. It's cool. They showed it at, I believe, last year's SitCon, or at a Around the Verse, not Around the Verse, Inside Star Citizen last time, or like shortly after SitCon. So good chance we start getting all of these different traversal options, like prone, swimming. EVA would be a huge one. EVA is just a mess and has been for about 5 years now. It used to not be a great system, but it made logical sense how to move around. Now your gun will hold still, and you'll twist around your gun. You'll just kind of see your hands doing these numbers. It's not awesome. And you'll kind of bump into something and you'll take 75% damage, or you'll spin all over the place, and EVA is in a bad place. But anyway, prone, ladder climbing. Kind of surprised ladder climbing didn't come with mantling, since it was part of the same demo. EVA, sliding, those kinds of things, we know they're out there. Pyro space station. So just to add a little bit more weight to the idea that Pyro could drop by the end of the year, we've got Pyro stations are ending back here, and they could, I would fully expect Pyro space stations to keep drawing out and out and out, even after Pyro drops. Like with Stanton, we got the most of the Lagrange stations, and then we got more. I would expect Pyro to kind of go the same way, where they'll give us most of like the big ticket ones, and they'll kind of work in smaller ones or asteroid stations. Just did a guess, but again, Pyro assets are kind of wrapping up now. So I mean, we've been seeing sneak peeks of them for 3 to 4 years. So, well, I guess 2 to 3 years. So it'd be real nice if we got to play around on the real thing. Just saying. Quantum simulation, that's another one that'd be real nice, that if server meshing came around, we actually got quantum working the way it's supposed to. I mean, this was the revealed at CitizenCon 2019. 4 years ago, they revealed this simulation to us. They're still faking the economy for the most part. Apparently, refueling is controlled by quantum, but I haven't really seen dramatic changes. Although I guess if it was working, you wouldn't see dramatic changes just because of the economy. Refinery ships, another one we could see this year. I would be surprised. I would expect them, this is probably just them looking at the actual gameplay loop itself, kind of theory crafting it. I would not expect to see refinery ships until we got the Expanse. I would expect that to be the first one, although technically the Starfarer does have a refinery on it. So there's a whole host of reputation things that are wrapping around the same time, even in time for SitCon. So yeah, there could be some big changes coming for reputation. I would assume these would drop with Pyro, just because there's a neat dichotomy with Pyro and Stanton. Stanton is a small, heavily populated, well-regulated system, and Pyro is a huge, less populated outlaw system. And so it's two very diametrically opposed systems. But if you're getting a really good reputation in Pyro, they're going to give you a really dirty look when you come over to Stanton, and same thing going the other way. So I could see them dropping a bunch of reputation things with Pyro to kind of jam in the consequences that going to Pyro is not going to be like going like Orison to Hurston or Crusader to Hurston. It's going to be, people are going to look at you differently when you go from one to the other or watch you a little closer. Resource management, this is engineering, week 12, next year asset. So that kind of strengthens my theory that if we're getting Pyro, or at least Pyro in the PTU at the end of the year, it's not going to drop with engineering or multi-crew gameplay like the engineering loop. RSI Polaris, again, 37 weeks. It's not 37 weeks. It's not wrapping here in 12. They're just doing kind of like the white box, making sure everything fits. Then next year it'll probably jump 90 weeks, might be 2 years. I wouldn't think it would take that long, but it might. We might get the Polaris in 2025. Hopefully we get it faster than that. Hopefully they kind of streamline their pipeline, but we'll see. Seated item handling. This is another one that I was expecting to see in 3.20, but I haven't seen it yet. In theory, its release was Squadron 42, Q2 of 2020. So Squadron 42 has had this in theory since 2020. Of course, the actor feature team was working on it last week, so who knows? But I would expect to see that one in the PU sooner rather than later by the year end. I don't know. It just kind of depends on how much of a priority it is. But the fact it's a Squadron 42 asset kind of suggests that at least for Squadron 42, it needs to be done pretty quick. Security network. This is another one that I thought would be kind of a dark horse for this year. This is the hacking gameplay or hacking game loop. 134 weeks. So, I mean, it does look like it's wrapping. I could see them dropping security network, maybe with the underground facilities and infiltration missions would make sense, which would mean next year. If they don't drop it with that, if it's kind of its own little thing, like security on your own ships, maybe this year, but I'd be surprised. This one I think is probably, even if they truly wrap it here, we're probably not going to get it in a patch until next year. But who knows? Sliding, again, wrapping around here. Looks pretty good. I mean, I know they've talked about it in the monthly reports, and generally they don't do that unless they feel like they're making good progress on it. So since we got Manling in 3.20, we might be getting sliding in 3.20.x. I would not be overly shocked if we started getting some of these traversal options in the game. So subsumption is just another AI thing. I would assume with server meshing, they would try to drop it with quantum and subsumption, just because if the servers are able to truly mesh, the NPCs should be more capable, and that would mean integrating things like quantum and subsumption into their behaviors, I would think. And maybe we start seeing some animals move around, because we know they've had some animals out there, like the space whale. Been 21-week sprint, been out there for a long time. We've seen some models of it, but I'm sure they're just not going to put it in until the servers can handle it. Swimming, again, wrapping around the same time. All of these traversal things wrap around the same time. Into the year, 3.20.x. It's possible. Will it happen? Don't know. The Tumble Stank, again, just want to point out there's no downstream teams in this. This is a smaller tank. It's single-seater. So VFX and audio shouldn't take too long, I wouldn't think. Mostly with that, I think it would depend on what other things are occupying the audio and VFX team's time. Okay, so let's go on to unannounced vehicles. So there's 4 here that I want to talk about. 11 weeks, this is almost certainly the Fury LX, which we've seen pictures even in the newest jump point. Had the Fury LX, and I'll just show that real quick. So they had a bit in the latest jump point on the development of the Fury, and right down here they've actually got the LX. So pretty much what I was saying is it looks like the engines might be slightly bigger and it doesn't have weapons. So that is why this sprint is only 11 weeks long, because all they have to do is take off the weapons and maybe tweak its metrics a little bit so that maneuvers a little bit different or is faster in a straight line. Who knows? But with that out of the way, we've got 3 ships here that we're likely getting this year. The Montreal team is working on these 2. This one right here, the real question is that we know, let me close this one so we know that's the LX. All 3 of these are likely straight to flyable. These 2 are further along than this one because, again, there are downstream teams that have worked on both of these. Now, the real question is, we know that there are 2 variants of the cutter out there, or at least we think there are. There's been some leaks. So is this one and this is the other? Or is this both variants and then we've got 2 other ships? As I've been looking at this, I think these are actually the 2 variants right there. We don't know what Montreal is working on or how they work. So we know that the EU or the EU vehicle content team tends to work on bigger ships. And we know the US team tends to work on like medium and industrial ships and things like that. So what does Montreal work on? We'll know when we get this ship. But that does leave the question that even if this and this are the cutter variants, what's this guy? I don't know. It looks like it's straight to flyable, but again, with Montreal, we don't know if their concept team is a separate team, like someone else did the concept thing on this and now Montreal gets to build it, or if the concept is actually wrapped up in this. We don't know. So once we get the first ship rolling out of the Montreal studio, we'll know more what to expect. Like if this one's straight to flyable, then we know they don't really do concepts, they just do straight to flyables. I would expect, or what I would hope CIG is doing with Montreal, since they are a PU dedicated team, is have them work on the backlog. Now, granted, I have a couple vids on the backlog and the nature of the backlog of the ships that we have, and most of the ships that are in the backlog are huge, or their game loop isn't in, or both. But there are some that aren't that, and so it would be nice if Montreal were working on that rather than brand new ships. And on that point, at this point, while it's kind of fun to speculate, it would be nice if CIG did a little bit less of this. Like this many unannounced things is starting to feel kind of like keeping everything under wraps for SitCon, in the sense that it's too much secrecy. Like, let us know what these ships are and what you're working on us, and let's go through the process of watching them get developed. That is a much cooler process and a lot more of how CIG used to do things than what they're doing now. Now everything's a big surprise, and if every time you walk into a room somebody screams surprise, after a little while you're just kind of like, could we not? And that's kind of the point that I'm hitting on this. It's nice in small doses, but that's like 20 unannounced things. That's enough. Underground facilities. I'm pretty sure this one would be one of those assets that they want to drop with Pyro. So you can see it's over in this week 12 area, which means next year. So maybe we don't get these with Pyro, or maybe Pyro isn't dropping at the end of the year. Just could go either way. I think CIG needs the win, but if it's a broken mess, better to take the loss and let people kind of stew over it while playing Starfield and Cyberpunk or whatever other games come out, and then drop it next year and everybody's like, oh, hey, Star Citizen, yeah, I used to really enjoy that game. They finally dropped Pyro, I'll check it out. Vehicle tractor beams wrapping around here, so that kind of goes along with my theory that they're holding back the C1 for this. Of course, once they drop the vehicle tractor beams, they can drop the SRV once they work on the audio for it. But here it is. And interestingly, this is one of the things that I thought was weird. The team that's been working on it for the last few months is the narrative team. So I'm not sure if they're hammering out some mechanic in their head or what. And then the other teams will jump on once narrative is kind of sussed out what vehicle tractor beams will do. But I mean, 104 weeks, you would think they would have done that way back here. And instead, you got narrative chewing on it and chewing on it and chewing on it. I mean, this is after the EUPU team has worked on it. That's 1 month, that's 2 months, 3.5 months. The narrative team is working on it. Don't know, gang. Do I think we could get it before the end of the year? Yeah, I mean, we've got tractor beams in the game. It's really just the working on a turret like the ones on the Hull C or the Caterpillar. Even ones that are on the ship, like I think even the Cuddy Black has a tractor beam. The 315P. There's a lot of ships that have a tractor beam integrated somewhere in them that just haven't been able to be used to this point. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would hope we see tractor beams before the end of the year. That would be a nice touch. Weapon misfire and wear. This is the one for a long time that I thought we'd be getting with engineering, just to would kind of have a nice synergy between those two, but you don't necessarily need it. The only thing that I think that weapon misfire and wear would really need is a way to repair your weapons. Like your ship, you've been able to repair by landing on a pad, calling up repair services and repairing it. But how do you fix a weapon once it starts taking wear? So we got to have some sort of mechanic to do that. And I don't think we get those. And yeah, I mean, I would assume that's the weapon feature team or weapon content team is working on how you fix them. It would be nice if CIG said, this is how you'll fix your weapons. And that is, oh, wait, no. Zero G push and pull. This one goes along with the EVA, which has been done for ages. Again, another traversal thing that they showed off at SitCon, I think it was last year. It would be nice to roll it in at the end of this year. Typically, a few years back, they said that they like to have most of the things shown in SitCon drop in the next year. Obviously, with Pyro, that kind of jumped the shark and didn't happen. But it would be nice if the little non-Pyro things at least made it in. But anyway, there was one last thing that I want to talk about, and I'm going to go over to here. So this is the info runners. They had a show, man, I think this was earlier in the week. I'll have a links in the down below parts, or maybe put a link in the up above parts, or both, because I'll do that for them. Info runners are really great to watch. X, who's over on the far left there, and I'm blocking Paul Shelley here, so there's Paul right there. So I'll just sit in Paul's seat. But anyway, listen to what X says, because X kind of goes off on this, and I agree with him to a point. And I'll get to that point at the end.
No, it's going to be Pyro.
I want Nick.
I want Nick's too, but it's going to be Pyro.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. It looks Pyro. That's my problem. Like, what else can you show us? You've showed us every planet. You've showed us outposts. You've showed us the station. What is there left? What is there left to show?
Stopping him there. So, what is left to show is to actually put it in our hands. And so X noticed, execute, noticed the same thing that I noticed. And it's that these are pretty clearly pyro assets. So why, and for those of you who don't know, this is the grab bag basically that you can buy. Sorry, the goodies pack. But what it comes with is Frontier undersuit, Frontier helmet, CitizenCon 2953 trophy, they always do that one, Outlaw shotgun, Headhunter Gang relic collectible, that is a pyro gang, Pyrotechnic amalgamated multi-tool in case, which is interesting. Do they actually have a picture of it up there? I don't think they do. A redacted ship plushie, a redacted challenge coin, or ship challenge coin, dragonfly paint. I mean, if it's those colors, no thank you, but it might just be the lighting on this that I really like. The, oh, I forget what it is, the leather armor looks kind of cool. If that's kind of that same shade and it's just because it has this weird yellow lighting on it, I might actually like that armor. Pyrotech amalgamated Spectrum badge. Nobody goes on Spectrum that you should listen to anyway. But anyway, all of that is pyro assets, and I think CIG couldn't be stupid enough to push pyro for a 4th year in a row without actually dropping pyro on us. So I think, like X was saying, that what else can you show us? You can actually give us pyro. And I think that's what this is showing. I think that these are all pyro assets because we're getting pyro at the end of the year. I would not be surprised if it hangs out in the PU or PTU for a long time, but I think we're getting pyro at the end of the year. If you think I'm right, think I'm wrong, let me know down below. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. I kind of threw that as kind of an offhand thing in my wild speculation a couple weeks ago. Now, the more I think about it, the more I think that they almost have to drop pyro this year. Yeah, that's a good place to wrap it. Let me know what you think and catch me next time.